There are people who know how to move destiny, how to shift what was written for one person and attach it to another. You were used as vessels for exchange.
Three women, one night, and a secret they buried so deep, they forgot it was still breathing. One of them has money that could fill a stadium, but her house is quiet in the way that breaks a person. No child, not one, not ever. One of them has children that fill every room, but the fridge is nearly empty, and her husband whispers prayers about money that keeps running away. One of them built an empire from nothing. 5 serious men, 5 serious promises. Every single one left before the year was out. 3 different lives, 3 different wounds, one night. They were roommates once, brilliant, hungry, on the edge of everything, and the night before their futures officially began, something entered that hotel room, and something left without their permission. This is the story of Ada, Bisi, and Tolu, and the convocation night that quietly rewrote all 3 of their destinies. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, let's go back to the beginning. They were called the 3 Flames across the hostel block. Not because they were reckless, not because they were loud, but because where they went, something lit up. 3 roommates, 3 minds, 3 different kinds of fire. Ada was the strategist. Calm the way still water is calm, deep and purposeful underneath. She spoke slowly, chose words carefully, and had a mind that turned every situation into an equation she could solve. She dreamed of companies, of boardrooms, of wearing success so naturally that people would think she was born into it. Bisi was the heart, soft in the best way. The kind of person who remembered your birthday, shared her last biscuit, and genuinely meant it when she said she was happy for you. She talked about children the way other people talked about travel. With excitement, with planning, with hunger. I want a full house, she always said. I want noise and mess and laughter everywhere. Tolu was the storm, bold, beautiful, unapologetic. She had clawed her way to university from a background that had given her nothing, no connections, no support, barely enough food. And she wore that journey like armor. No man will define my direction, she said once, while pressing her uniform at midnight. I will build my own road. 3 flames, but even bright flames go dim when they are hungry enough. Final year, convocation approaching, and the bills did not care about brilliance. Ada owed her final tuition clearance. Bisi had borrowed from 3 people already and was too ashamed to borrow again. Tolu's rent was overdue, and her landlord had started knocking twice a week. They sat in their room one night, 3 candles between them, Nepa having taken the light again, and they counted what they had. Not enough. We have worked too hard, Ada said quietly. To lose clearance now. No one answered. The candle flame moved without wind. That was the night the idea entered. Not as a plan, not as a decision, just as a whisper. Their classmate Ngozi had mentioned certain visitors who came to town during convocation season. Wealthy men, older, generous. They only want company, Ngozi had said with a careful smile. Dinner, conversation, nothing serious. Ada had dismissed it the first time. Bisi had changed the subject. Tolu had said, over my body. But that was before the landlord's 3rd knock, before the registrar's final notice, before the candle burned lower. Hunger does something to conviction. It doesn't break it all at once. It just wears it down, quietly, until the thing you once swore you would never do begins to sound almost reasonable. 3 days later, they called Ngozi. The men arrived on a Friday evening. 3 of them. Sent in a car that smelled of leather and something expensive none of the girls could name. The first, tall, silver-haired, a deep voice, introduced himself as Chief Lanray, a businessman from Lagos, relaxed, almost fatherly in his manner. The second introduced himself as Honorable Raymond, a politician from the South. He laughed easily and kept refilling glasses. The third man never gave a name. He sat at the end of the table. Ate little, said less. But his eyes moved in a way that made the room feel watched from every angle at once. "Who is he?" Tolu whispered to Ngozi. Ngozi smiled tightly. "Don't ask about him. Just don't." The hotel was a kind the girls had only seen in films. Marble floors, chandeliers, food arranged on silver trays as if beauty was a requirement even for eating. Ada touched the edge of her wine glass and thought, one night, just this once, then clearance, then graduation, then everything I planned. Bisi laughed at something Honorable Raymond said and told herself, this is just dinner. Tolu looked at the quiet man at the end of the table and felt something she did not have a name for. Not attraction, not fear, something older than both. But she pushed it down and smiled. Strange things began to happen slowly, the kind of strangeness that is easy to explain away in the moment. Ada's head grew heavy an hour earlier than it should have. She felt slow, dimmed, like a phone on 5% battery. Bisi found herself forgetting pieces of the conversation. One moment, Honorable Raymond was talking about Abuja. The next, she was looking at an empty plate she did not remember eating from. And Tolu, sharp, alert Tolu, woke up at 3 a.m. to a sound from the bathroom. She lay still. Someone was whispering, low, rhythmic, like a recitation. She held her breath and listened. Then the whispering stopped, and the room temperature dropped, and she looked at the mirror on the wall. And she could have sworn the reflection moved a half second after she did. She told herself it was the wine, closed her eyes, chose not to know. When they woke, the men had left before dawn. On the table, an envelope for each of them. Enough to clear everything, and more. Jewelry, perfume. A note from Chief Lanray that said simply, "For the future's ahead of you." They looked at each other. Ada counted her envelope, said nothing. Bisi touched her necklace gently, like she wasn't sure it was real. Tolu stared at the bathroom door for a long moment. Then she picked up her bag. "Let's go," she said. They checked out, took a taxi back to campus, laughed nervously about the food, paid their clearance, graduated 3 weeks later, and walked into the world. Never knowing that what the morning felt like, that hollow, slightly off-center feeling they each had but none of them named, was not the residue of a guilty night. It was an inventory. Something had been counted, something had been taken, and something had been left in its place. If you're still watching up to now, type, "I'm still here," in the comments section, because what you are about to hear is where the story truly begins. Ada built her empire the way she always said she would. She was 26 when she opened her first store, 28 when the import business took off, 30 when she married Amika, a good man, steady and proud. And they moved into a house that had 4 bedrooms because Ada had always planned to fill them. The business side never disappointed her. Every deal moved, every investment returned. Money arrived before she fully finished calling for it. People in her circle called her the Midas woman. They said she was touched, anointed, built different. But the nursery on the 2nd floor stayed empty. Year 1, nothing. The doctor said, give it time. Year 2, still nothing. Different doctor, same conclusion. Year 3, tests, more tests. Specialist in Lagos, specialist in London. Numbers and charts and careful voices explaining, we cannot find a specific cause. Amika held her hand in every waiting room, but Ada could see the question forming in his eyes as the years passed, the one he was too kind to ask aloud. She stopped designing in the nursery eventually, but sometimes, on Sunday evenings when the house was quiet, she would walk up the stairs, stand in the doorway, and look at the crib she had picked out in year 1. Untouched. Waiting. God, she would whisper, what is missing? She never got an answer she could hold. Bisi married Amika's friend Dare 2 years after graduation. Dare was a building contractor with a good name and a solid reputation. When they married, he had 3 ongoing projects and 2 more lined up. Life looked full of forward motion. Then the children came. Fast and joyful, exactly as Bisi had prayed. First Mirabelle, then the twins, Io and Adi. Then Little Miracle. 4 children in 6 years. The house was everything Bisi had dreamed of. Loud, warm, full, except that money began to leave the same speed. The children arrived. A project fell through. A client disappeared with a deposit. A building collapsed before completion. No one hurt. But the investigation and legal fees swallowed everything. Dare sat at the kitchen table one night, staring at papers, and said quietly, almost to himself, "Bisi, I don't understand it. I am working, but since we married, it is like money is afraid of my name." She came and sat beside him. "We will be okay," she said. "You always say that." Because it is always true. But that night, after he slept, she sat in the kitchen alone, and she counted the coins in the jar she kept behind the cooking oil. And the number was not enough. And she pressed her palms flat on the table and said nothing. Because there was nothing to say. Tolu had built exactly what she said she would. By 32, she had a logistics company, an events management firm, and a stake in a real estate development in Abuja. She had been featured in 2 magazines. She had spoken on panels about women in business. She had done it without a father's money, without a husband's name, without anyone's blueprint. And yet, there had been Emeka. Not Ada's Emeka, a different man, same name. They dated for 11 months. Then he left so suddenly that the explanation he gave did not match the speed of his departure. Then Femi, 9 months, then gone. Then Chidi, then Kola, then Uche. Each one arrived seriously. Each one left before the relationship had fully taken root. Kola, the one she had genuinely loved, sat across from her on the last evening and said something she had never forgotten. "Tolu, I don't know how to explain this. You are the most impressive person I have ever met. But being near you feels like standing next to a door that keeps pushing me out. I fight to stay, and I am too tired to keep fighting something I cannot see." She had not cried when he left. She cried 3 days later, in her car, in her parking lot, where no one could see. She had 5 children by 4 different serious relationships. She loved every one of them fiercely. But the house, the big, well-furnished, carefully decorated house, felt like a building in which something essential was permanently absent. It was Professor Adeyemi's funeral that brought them back together. He had been their favorite lecturer, the one who stayed late, the one who wrote recommendation letters without being asked. They had not seen each other in 11 years. At first, laughter. Genuine, warm, the kind that comes from shared memory. Ada's expensive agbada, Bisi's tired but bright eyes, Tolu's confident posture that still made people turn. They sat together under the canopy after the service, and slowly, as the crowd thinned and the afternoon grew still, the laughter became something quieter. Ada said, "I have everything I said I wanted, except the one thing I want most." Bisi looked at her. "Children?" Ada nodded. Bisi looked at the ground. "I have 4 children, but my husband is a good man carrying a weight that never lifts. We have love and almost nothing else." Tolu was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I have built everything myself. I am proud of it. But no man can stay beside me. Not one." Then Bisi said it, quietly, almost afraid of her own voice. "Do you remember the hotel?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Ada's hand stilled in her lap. Tolu looked up. No one spoke for a long time. Then Ada said, "I think about it." "So do I," said Tolu. "I have never said that to anyone, but yes, that night. Something about that night has never left me." "The man who never gave his name," Bisi whispered. They looked at each other, and the thing that had been unspoken between them for 11 years finally had a shape. They drove 4 hours to find her. A woman named Mama Efua. 70, perhaps older. The kind of face that had witnessed enough to be permanently calm. They sat in her courtyard and they told her everything. The financial pressure, the night, the men, the nameless man, the years that followed. Mama Efua listened without interrupting, eyes closed, hands folded. When they finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she opened her eyes. "You were not simply taken advantage of," she said. Her voice was low and steady. "You were used as vessels for exchange. The man without a name, he was not there for company. He was there to work." Ada leaned forward. "What do you mean, work?" "There are people," Mama Efua said carefully, "who know how to move destiny. How to shift what was written for one person and attach it to another. It requires proximity. It requires night. It requires that the subject is unguarded." Bisi's voice shook. "What was taken from us?" The old woman looked at each of them in turn. "From you," she said to Ada. "Fruitfulness. The capacity for life to multiply through your body. It was redirected." Ada's face did not move, but her eyes filled. "From you," she said to Bisi. "Abundance. The thread of material prosperity attached to your household, cut and sent elsewhere." Bisi pressed her lips together hard. "From you," she said to Tolu. "Covenant. The spiritual architecture that allows a union to hold, to deepen instead of collapse." Tolu stared at her hands. "But here is what you must understand," Mama Efua continued. "What was taken from one of you did not disappear. It was not destroyed, it was displaced." She paused. "You each received what another lost." Ada looked slowly at Bisi. Bisi looked slowly at Ada. Tolu looked at both of them. Ada said, "Her children. I was carrying—" "Not her children specifically," the old woman said gently. "The energy, the inheritance, the spiritual permission for life to be fruitful in the home. You have been living in the portion meant for another." "And she has been living in mine," Bisi said. Not angry, just, finally, understanding. They sat with it. This knowledge that had been living in their bodies for 11 years, that had showed up as empty nurseries and shrinking bank accounts and men who left without reasons. Now it had a name. Tolu was the one who asked the question they were all afraid to ask. "Can it be reversed?" Mama Efua was quiet again. Then, "Yes, but not by ritual. Not by another night. Not by anything external." She looked at all three of them. "It requires truth first. You must stop pretending the night did not happen. You have all spent years keeping this secret even from yourselves. Secret is what gives this kind of thing its power. Then it requires forgiveness, not of the men, of yourselves. You were desperate young women who made a choice under pressure. The shame you have carried has become a second weight. It must be set down. And then it requires that you choose each other, that what was broken in one night, in a room together, begins to mend in rooms together again. Not perfectly, not instantly, but genuinely." She folded her hands again. "You came into this together. The healing will not come alone." They drove home mostly in silence, but it was a different kind of silence. Not the silence of secrets, the silence of people who have finally said the thing that needed to be said. They began meeting every week, a different house each time, no cameras, no performance. They talked about the night, properly for the first time. Not to accuse, not to dramatize, but to say, "This happened. We were young and afraid and hungry. We did not fully understand what we were walking into, and we have been carrying this quietly for over a decade." They cried, all three of them, in the same room, together, the way they had never been able to cry alone. Ada funded a small catering business for Bisi, quietly, without announcement. "Not charity," she said when Bisi hesitated. "Investment, in someone I should have been investing in for years." Bisi brought her children to Ada's house every Saturday, the big house that had been too quiet. little miracle called Ada, Auntie Beautiful, and fell asleep on her sofa, and Ada sat beside her and just breathed. Tolu began therapy. She began asking questions about why she had always kept people at a distance, even while wanting them close. She started learning the difference between independence and protection, between being strong and being sealed. And slowly, not dramatically, not overnight, things began to shift. Ada's doctors found no medical explanation for what changed in year 12. She carried twins to 38 weeks, a boy and a girl. She named them Joy and Emmanuel. Bisi's catering business, small at first, then steady, then significant, began providing the stability Dare's contracting business never could alone. The jar behind the cooking oil grew heavier. Then it was replaced by something that didn't need to be hidden. Tolu met a widower at an industry dinner. A man named Solomon who had 2 children and no interest in performance. Their first conversation lasted 4 hours. He did not leave after 9 months. He stayed. And when she waited for the invisible door to push him away, it didn't. Was it miracle? Was it the simple power of women healing together? Was it what happens when people stop letting shame write their future? Perhaps all of it. Perhaps none of it is possible to fully separate. But all 3 of them agreed on one truth. The night that stole from them only held power for as long as it remained unspoken. The moment they named it, to each other, to themselves, something released. Sometimes the greatest theft is invisible. It does not take your wallet or your car or anything a police report can document. It takes the quiet things, the things you cannot hold in your hand but feel every morning when you wake up to a life that is almost right, almost whole, almost everything you planned for. And the people who carry those wounds longest are not the dramatic ones. They are the ones who learn to smile around the missing pieces, who built impressive lives on foundations with fractures in them, who did everything right in public and sat alone in private asking the same unanswered question. What is missing? Sometimes the answer is not a spiritual mystery. Sometimes it is simply a secret you have been too afraid to say out loud. And sometimes restoration begins the exact moment shame loses its silence. What do you think truly happened that night? Was it spiritual manipulation, an ancient kind of theft dressed in modern clothing? Or was it the long shadow of desperate choices that quietly shapes a life for years? And have you ever known someone, or been someone, who looked completely blessed from the outside, while privately carrying something they could not name? Tell me in the comments. I read them. If this story moved something in you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Someone who is building in silence. Someone who is smiling around missing pieces. Someone who needs to know they are not alone in what they are carrying. Like this video. It genuinely helps more people find these stories. And subscribe to this channel so you are here when the next one arrives. Because real stories, the ones that ask real questions, deserve real listeners. Until the next one, carry your truth gently, but carry it.